Hi, everybody. My name is Kevin Long from Crowd Compass, and this is Innovation in Motion, monthly, almost monthly thought leader gathering about interactive marketing and online innovation. Today's topic is pretty interesting because it's on the edge of the marketing, what we do. We're focusing on sales, how to empower and motivate through big data. We'll also be talking a little about small data as well. We're going to look at it from a few different viewpoints of the small company, let's say 1 to 10 people, the medium-sized company, 10 to 250 or so people, and then large companies. The thoughts here is to get some what's happening with big data and what does that mean for sales, and then how is just regular data helping the small business up to the medium-sized big company be more effective with their sales. Just really quick, we want to thank our sponsors. One is Crowd Compass, the other is TAO, the other is Puppet Labs for this space, which is great. And then if we could just say, I want to actually have CorSource come up and just say a special word, because we're not drinking PBR tonight because of CorSource. Corey, if you could just come up and say hello.
Thanks, Kevin.
Everyone appreciates going to meetups and getting some food and drink, and really appreciate your ongoing support. So with that, a couple housekeeping things. If you're using Twitter, hashtag INPDX, INPDX, livestreaming.com. We have hundreds of thousands of people that log on every month to watch us live. Hi, everybody. And if you can't make it, you can always check livestream.com/innovation in motion. And lastly, Paul Collette does videoing, records it every month. If anyone ever needs video support, please reach out to Paul. With that, I'd like to do a quick intro to the panelists, but then we're just going to finish up with these questions and make sure Spencer does not win a prize tonight. We're going to dive right into the panel. So just a special thanks to the panelists. To my right, I have Brian McCarthy. Brian is a VP of Sales at Birst, and Brian is traveling in from...
Mile High City.
The Mile High City. Wow, isn't that Washington now? No, that is Denver, right?
You got it.
All right, Denver. Thanks for being here, Brian. Next to him is Scott Campbell. Scott is the VP of Marketing at Puppet Labs. He has the home turf advantage tonight here at Puppet, so he's going to get a lot of cheers and response from the audience. I'm assuming that's what you're expecting, Scott?
Did you say VP of Marketing?
No, oh my God.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I didn't mean to give you such a compliment. VP of Sales.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you, yes.
Often mistaken.
Often mistaken, that's right. VP of Sales at Puppet Labs. Thanks for being here, Scott. Thanks for walking 40 feet from your desk. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Randy Weber, VP of Sales from Zapproved. Randy, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
We're going to start with Scott. I think we have a slide for you, Scott.
Okay, that'll help. I don't remember.
There you go, you're up.
All right. So let's see. I started my high-tech B2B sales career at RogueWave way back in 1994. It makes me very old, some gray. So that means next year it'll be 20 years almost or 20 years exactly that I've been selling software to other enterprises. At RogueWave, I was there for about 5 years, managed most of the sales team at one point, and then left after 5 years. We went public in '97, and I, for whatever reason, thought, okay, well, that's how you do it. Is you join small companies, you join as one of the first employees, you go public a couple years later, and then you move on to the next company. So I joined Tripwire, and that didn't happen. So I spent about 6 years there. It was a great ride. Went through the 2000 .bomb, all that kind of stuff, and then eventually left for Jive Software. I became the VP of Sales. Jive, I was there for almost 4 years, saw a dramatic rise and growth in the organization. I was the 7th employee. By the time I left, we had over 200 employees and about an annual run rate of about almost $40 million in revenue. So that was a good run. Left there for Signacert, spent about a year there. We sold the company at Harris Corp, and then I joined Puppet Labs about 4 years ago as the 4th employee. So I keep joining companies earlier and earlier. I guess the next one I'm going to have to start my own. Puppet Labs, we're about 200 employees now. This is our corporate headquarters. We've got probably 30 employees that are located remotely. We've got a large office in the UK. We do data center automation software. I was describing this to one of the attendees over by the bar earlier. It's like the old IBM commercials where they talked about computers fixing computers. Does anybody remember those? Yeah, that's what Puppet Labs does now. Of course, that's 15 years later. So Puppet Labs, we help automate the management of IT data centers. So if you've got to stand up 1,000 servers, 2,000 servers in the cloud, hybrid cloud, or physical hardware, you need to provision those systems with software, middleware, and applications. You need to keep them all in a known good state and avoid configuration drift. You program that all using the Puppet language. Puppet gets those systems into a known good state and keeps them in a state, that known good state, if they change. So we help companies like Visa, PayPal, State Farm, Kaiser Permanente, a wide variety of different clients manage their IT infrastructure.
Scott, just to add on, what exactly does your software do, just to drill in a little bit, to keep them in a known good state?
Yep.
Meaning they're not going to crash, meaning...
I'm not sure how far you want to go with this, but I could talk all night. Let's see, and they experienced the same thing at Tripwire where we sold a product that helped avoid this. But if you've got 1,000 servers in a data center, after a while they start developing their own personality. What happens is you've got, at any point in time, you've got maybe 20 people that have access to that system. You've got sysadmins, security folks, developers, QA folks, what have you, all applying different patches, different levels of application, what have you. And so over the course of time, with that unstable infrastructure where every server is like a unique snowflake, you try to deploy new software onto those servers, it becomes very unstable. Things work fine when they're in the QA or the staging process. You deploy them in production, things fail, and you're not quite sure why that is. And that's because you've got that very unpredictable nature of your data infrastructure. So what Puppet does is you programmatically say, using the Puppet language, you state the end state of that system. You want this version of the operating system, these configuration settings, these network settings, these applications in these particular versions, and then Puppet will get that system into that known good state, that intended state. And then if anybody monkeys with those configurations or changes an application or makes a patch that they shouldn't have done, then Puppet will revert that system back to that known good state. And that provides a lot of stability. With that stability, it allows organizations and businesses to release software faster to their end users. They can deliver new features to business users within the organization or their customers faster. It helps them make more money.
God, I'll buy it. I'll buy it. How many salespeople do you have?
About 27.
Okay, 27. Okay, Randy, you're up, and I have a slide for you. Look at that. About Zapproved and about you.
Great. So Zapproved was founded in 2008. We're about 5 years old. I joined Zapproved in 2010 as employee number 7 and the first salesperson in the organization. And so I've been through the wild ride of, basically essentially zero revenue and then building the first initial customers and then, scaling the team from there. Our product is called Legal Hold Pro. It is decidedly uncool, as I've told many of you today, although it's really great because it is absolutely required by any company that experiences any level of litigation or regulatory investigations whatsoever. We help them manage communication workflow and compliance process around data preservation. We sell to Fortune 500 and Global 1000 organizations. We compete against IBM, Symantec, and some other companies such as those. About me, yeah, I think I covered it, didn't I?
And you said how many salespeople?
Oh, we have our sales organization is 15
15
right now.
Okay.
So
okay.
we're roughly half the company.
Okay. Great. And Brian.
Hey, I'm Brian McCarthy. I'm VP Sales at Birst. A little bit about Birst. We were founded back in 2004 as a company called Success Metrics, and not unlike probably a lot of the folks who are involved in startups here in the room, a great idea went awry due to circumstances beyond our control. So Success Metrics provided effectively the analytics shop for a lot of the large brokerage houses, retail brokerage houses in the United States. We are off to a swimming start through 2007 and acquired customers like TD Ameritrade and Fidelity and RBC, some of whom remain customers of ours. But obviously we had this inconvenient thing happen in 2008 where the financial markets kind of revolted and many of those companies who were customers of ours were no longer in business. So we repurposed Success Metrics as a cloud BI platform, business analytics platform, and rebranded ourselves as Birst in about 2010. and have been selling a commercially available cloud BI platform since then.
And you guys just raised some money?
We did. We just raised $38 million. It's kind of our D&A round.
Wow.
$38 million from Sequoia, who's been our lead investor in each of our last 3 rounds.
Brian's buying beers after the panel, people. Holy cow. And then your sales team, how big?
So in terms of true direct sales, we have roughly 30 people globally, and then we have a large, like I'm sure these guys do, lead development apparatus that's attached to sales, which is pretty close to that in number as well.
Do you guys have, is your structure, everybody on the panel here, is your structure mainly direct sales, or do you have pre-sales and direct sales structure? Maybe if we can just walk down the line.
Yeah, so we have a sales development team pre-qualifies marketing leads, and then account executives that are the quota-carrying direct salespeople.
How many are the pre versus the quota-carrying sales?
We have 5 sales development representatives. 3 of them are focused on inbound kind of marketing lead qualification. 2 are doing outbound prospecting, and then I have 8 account executives.
Scott?
So we've only got 2 telequalifiers. Most of the leads go directly into our inside sales team. We've got about 13, 14 people in inside sales. And then we've got the inside sales folks work the corresponding field reps. There's roughly a 2-to-1 ratio, 2 inside reps per field rep. Yeah.
Okay. You kind of said it, but
I've kinda said
you're
it.
direct. How many direct?
Roughly 30 globally.
How many pre? Or is it all direct because it's such a high-touch product?
So we do have a lead development function, and there are as many people as who have graduated from Gonzaga over the last 2 years. We seem to farm kids out of there.
Okay.
So whatever the graduating class is every spring from Gonzaga ends up at Birst.
Okay.
Doing lead development of some.
So
some capacity.
so a bunch of pre-sales and 1 university.
Yeah, you got
Okay,
something
got
like
it.
that.
All right. Okay, so Brian was really nice and sent me 2 slides that what I thought was a good kickoff here. It's just, you're talking about big data and business intelligence platforms. Big data is kind of a big buzzword, and the reality is salespeople just need data. And Brian brought up a good point when we were connecting earlier that really it's about small data, breaking it down. And so he has 2 slides here, and Brian, I'll let you talk about it, of just giving some actual case studies, and then a second slide is how are they using it?
Sure, great. So before I start, we referenced Jive up here. Is anybody a Jive employee? I know Scott used to work at Jive, but...
All right,
Jive
you can
employees?
say anything you want.
All right, great. We can lie like crazy about all the value they're getting in at Birst. I think historically, big data has been the purview of companies who sell directly to consumers, so B2C operations, whereas small data has been the purview of the B2B space. That's obviously changing. We're creating a lot of data, on an exponential level almost daily. So it's no longer an either-or proposition. But what we found is that companies today still struggle very much with small data. And what I mean by that is, just as a sales leader, having to understand or trying to understand what's changed in my pipeline week to week. What opportunities have dropped out, what opportunities have come into the pipeline, what adjustments have we made, what deals have we lost, those kinds of things. And that's an example of small data. So just managing the forecast in my business, right? And then larger data operations like, I mentioned that this is how we kind of got our start with folks like RBC, where they're pulling literally terabytes of data nightly that consist of all kind of trade and arbitrage data. So you think about their 2,000 or 3,000 licensed brokers and all the trades they execute on behalf of their customers, pulling that data off those trade systems, as well as a number of different lists, and data sources about those customers. So what's your household income? I may only know a little bit about you because this is all you have under management with me, but there's a wealth of data that's publicly available about you. So how do you pull that in there and marry those two together to make predictive recommendations about what products may be interesting to you or of value to you? So that's kind of the spectrum of small data to big data.
Yeah, just actually today is where I really got it. It's not about, there's lots of automation out there like Eloqua and Omniture that can pull this information together, but it's about going beyond just the marketing department and actually pulling from facilities, actually pulling from sales, actually pulling from public sources like you're talking about,
Yeah.
and overlaying it to get that big data flow.
And even even in the small data realm, you still want to tie together those things. So, Omniture can obviously tell you all about your web traffic, who's hitting your website, and those kinds of things. Eloqua or Marketo can tell you all about the kind of leads those are generating. And Salesforce can tell you a whole lot about your opportunity management. But being able to tie those three together to say that when we do this placement, we're able to generate X dollars in ASP as a result, and our close rate is 75% as opposed to this placement generates a lower ASP, and our close rate is only 10% on those leads.
So, Brian, maybe just take a couple minutes. We want to keep moving here, but if you could maybe take just an example of Jive I have this, you sent me a slide of this diagnostic now and then how they're using it, and then also this predictive I think is really interesting.
Sure.
But maybe just take a couple minutes because we want to keep moving.
Sure. How many SaaS businesses are there out there in the room? So you're collecting a wealth of information about the way people are interacting with your platform every day. And what Jive uses Birst for is to help understand how people are using their platform so they can identify cross-sell and upsell opportunities. So they have several different subscription tiers, and people use the product in different ways across those subscription tiers. And what their salespeople really want every day is, you mentioned 2% of all cold calls result in an appointment. Wouldn't it be nice if that were more like 40%, right? Because I know that that person has maxed out their number of users on that subscription tier, so if I call them, they're likely to move to the next subscription tier. So that's one example of the way Jive is using us. On a more predictive scale, the brokerage use case is relevant, right? So as a broker, I know everything about you because you're my highest net worth individual, but I know nothing about the other 9,000 people in my book of business. Wouldn't it be nice to, again, taking all that trade arbitrage information and sociographic and demographic information, be able to walk in every morning and get by star, 5 stars for a good recommendation, 1 star for a bad recommendation, what kinds of products you're likely to respond to if I make an offer to you.
Okay. All right, so let's grab on and actually get these hands-on. Randy, I want to have you talk a little bit about productivity. Let's see here.
Productivity.
Yeah, you were giving examples of actual hands-on, and so there's this like big data. Hey, here's all these great things. The reality is, a lot of like the small companies. Let's say you're a 1 to 5 person or even 100 person. You're not at that space yet. So what are you doing with like a 15, 30 person team to actually use data more effectively for sales?
Yeah. Well, we measure a lot of things, and from the very beginning, I've really put an effort and a focus on instrumenting our sales process, instrumenting our systems. We use Salesforce.com very heavily to do that, and in terms of kind of individual rep level productivity, what that has given us is really a wealth of data around what our best opportunities look like, what our ideal prospect profile looks like, what are the types of companies where we do extremely well, or what are the types of companies where we don't do so well, what are the other sort of behavioral factors. I focus a lot on observable buyer behavior in our process as well, and what are the behaviors that we know correlate very highly with buying ultimately, because that's what we really care. And so it allows our reps to, when they're prospecting, focus on the very best opportunities, focus their energy where they have the highest possible rate of return, because I believe your 2% statistic, but I think you can increase your odds if you focus where you have a better chance to win. The other thing that we've been able to do a lot over the last 3 years is identify constantly bottlenecks in our sales process. And so we look for stages in the sales process that take the longest, or areas where we have the most fallout in our pipeline, areas where there is friction for one reason or another. And anyone who talks to me about sales for any length of time will hear me talk about a factory analogy, because I think about it in a very, in that way where, cold suspects are kind of your raw material, and you have this factory that generates money-paying, money-generating customers and revenue out the other end of it. And so if you can identify where those bottlenecks in the process are, identify what's causing them, root cause that, and then remove those bottlenecks, there's always going to be another one, but it's this constant process of tuning that machine that we've been able to and continue to optimize.
Scott, productivity, right? So you've dealt with these companies that are 5, 8 people up to now Puppet has like 200, right? Not all sales, but bigger teams. How do you prioritize? Like how should small business owners prioritize their sales? Let's say you're to have productivity, how should they prioritize using data to sell? Let's say it's a 3-person business, and how does that differ when you get to be like a 20-person business? How do you be more productive using data right out of the gate versus when you've grown a little bit?
Well, the trick at a small company is having enough data to gather to make any decisions on, right? But I've always been surprised with how little data actually reflects strong trends and how they change over the course of time. So in other words, you can have 10 pieces of data, which doesn't seem like a lot, but typically 9 times out of 10, if it does show a pattern, it does show a trend, it will continue as you get 100 or 1,000 pieces of data. So I think you can use small amounts of data to make big decisions. One of the things that Puppet Labs did, and I think this is a fairly unique, so it may not apply to many of the folks in the audience, but it's based on an open source version of the product. Puppet is an open source software tool that's used by literally hundreds of thousands of people worldwide. So we get a lot of noise. We get a lot of people that come into the organization through the website. They download the product for free. They download the enterprise product that we've got available for free to manage up to 10 nodes. We've got 3 or 4 different open source projects. They sign up for webinars, all sorts of different activities. And this is true when we had 7 people in the organization. The same is true today when we have 200. And one of the things we did as well was instrument the sales and marketing funnel as much as possible, as early as possible in the process. And as a part of that, what we did is score those leads. How many people do lead scoring right now? Okay. Good percentage, right? And we all know how important that is to do, especially when we're talking about trying to sell a free version of a product where a lot of the people are downloading your product or sitting in their underwear on a Saturday night and just playing around on their home computers.
Scott, how many questions were in your lead scoring?
How many questions?
Yeah.
So questions, the way we do lead scoring is really more, well, there are 2 things we measure. We do behavioral score, so what they do on the website. If they go to the pricing page, they download the enterprise version of the product, they go to the services page, for example, to inquire about potentially training services or consulting services we can do. We score that lead higher.
So it's activity, and what tools are you using to score activity?
So,
just on that side. What activity? Because I know there's also profile, right? But just
correct.
activity, what are you tracking it with? Are you using Eloqua, Marketo?
We're using Marketo.
Marketo.
Yeah, Marketo.
Okay.
So we've got embedded JavaScript, I guess, in the web pages that help identify when people land on certain pages.
And how many pages they clicked on, and
exactly.
that's okay.
Yeah.
So that's the activity side, and then you do profiling as well.
We call demographic scoring.
Demographic
so
scoring.
we cross those. So we've got the scoring 1, 2, 3 on the behavioral score, and then we have a score of A, B, C on the demographic. That's, do we have geographic data for where that person came from? Did they answer questions when they filled out a form, such as when are they interested in purchasing Puppet Enterprise, or how many nodes do they have in their environment? If we get a B 1, 2 rating for, and they cross over, it's kind of a little complicated to describe. It's better to show. Then they become what we call sales ready. And that sales ready then goes to the sales department. The sales rep is prompted via an activity. It's automatically created in Salesforce to contact that individual. Customized emails are dripped out to that individual to help encourage them to move on in the process. If they downloaded Puppet Enterprise, it'll show them different sources of information and training material that they can use to better use the product and have a successful evaluation. So I think we've done a fairly good job with that. And the reason why we do that, and I think going back to your original question of why is it important, or what do you do when you're a small company? One of the biggest concerns when you're a small company is, how do I make the sales and marketing process efficient? I could spend hundreds of thousands of dollars going and get a client that the lifetime value of that customer is going to be $80,000, right? And that business will fail. So the purpose or the purpose for using data And using all these great tools we have at our disposal now is to make that process as efficient as possible. And from our perspective, that means taking prospects that are high up in the funnel, in other words, just kind of casually interested, and not spending a lot of time with them until they get pretty far down the funnel. They've already evaluated the product. They've already identified a need within their organization because they came to us and downloaded Puppet Enterprise to solve some sort of problem. They've already exhibited a lot of interest, and so we want to engage them lower down in the funnel. The cost of sale is not as great. We don't have to educate that client as much, and then, of course, make the sale.
So this is where I run into is business intelligence tools in this scenario, you just don't even need them, right? It's like I got all this noise coming in, people are downloading white papers, they're going to webinars, I got email lists, I got calls, it's funneling through, and I'm scoring them on their activity, and I'm scoring them on like, did they have a Gmail versus like a real, company email, things like that. My points are showing up, and I'm like, hey, salespeople, call these 20 people before you call these 100 people. So in that scenario, is business intelligence tools just not helpful? You don't need them?
Well, I mean, I think what you're describing is a business intelligence tool within a platform like Marketo. So most of this generation software platforms, whether that's Salesforce or Marketo, have at least some rudimentary business intelligence capabilities. They can't survive without it. I think what's, as organizations mature, I think what's helpful to understand is how those pieces of data interrelate across those systems, right? You're typically never going to run your entire enterprise in Marketo, right? You might have NetSuite for your GL. You might have Salesforce to manage your opportunities. And being able to understand, you talked about, Scott, is this a profitable customer acquisition for us? You really don't know that. You can't understand that unless you're pulling data, for example, from your GL, which captures all the costs associated with the various parts of your company, right? So you can't make an informed decision about whether or not that was a valuable client to sign unless you have that data as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Randy, are you using any BI tools? When I say BI tools, I'm thinking of like Birst, right? So not like marketing automation tools like
It's the only one you
Marketo.
should think of, right?
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Andrew said he'd pay me $5 every time I say Birst. So like, okay, Birst, Domo, good data, like I'm seeing that as BI tools. But then I'm just seeing what most of the other companies are using is like HubSpot or Marketo or Eloqua or Acton, these like marketing automation tools.
Right.
Are you guys just using Salesforce and these marketing automation, what I call marketing automation tools, or do you have a layer of BI software on top of it?
No, we just have Marketo and Salesforce.com, and we use the capabilities within them, and sometimes it's a little difficult to sort of stitch together the marketing funnel and the sales funnel, but that's a battle we've been fighting for some time.
Yeah.
And so no, we don't have any kind of higher level BI tools.
Which I don't think a lot of companies do, and you guys are moving into this market that's fairly new and getting popular. People are starting to get better at having like full closed loop reporting, and now they're like, what's next?
Well, I mean, people have been chasing the elusive 360-degree view for nearly 40 years. I mean, there's a reason $50 billion a year is spent on business analytics, right? I think the challenge has been that the technology used to do that has been cumbersome and clunky, and it would take a room full of people this big just to create that one report that stitched together your marketing funnel and your sales funnel. And newer technologies like Birst, like Domo, like Good Data, and some of the others out there have done a better job of making that process of stitching together those components of your business much easier. So we are seeing a rapid acceleration in kind of the next generation of business analytics software as a result.
Okay.
Oh, I will say this too, sorry for jumping
Go
in,
for it.
but Scott mentioned customer acquisition cost. That's something we track with kind of fanatical enthusiasm because we're very lean. We haven't raised a ton of capital, and so we have to watch the profitability of our customer acquisition very closely. And
How do you track it?
So in a spreadsheet, right?
Okay.
I mean, and we use rules of thumb for lifetime value, and and it's an inexact science. And the thing, but measuring that and tracking it is okay. But there's sort of the step beyond it, which is kind of diagnostic,
Right.
which we just don't have, right? That's I think where, if you were pulling true kind of cost data that was associated with the acquisition of that customer relative to that customer's revenue, we'd have much more insight than we do currently.
Okay. Scott, I have this slide that you sent over. I don't quite, I know what these things are, but I'm wondering, when I think of you, Scott, I think of like someone that lines up salespeople in like military style.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't know why. I've never seen this guy work or anything. But can you guys see that?
I've
Like
had
a
that
military
reputation
style,
before, yep.
running a sales
Get on the
team,
phone.
call, set down, call, set down. I
Yep.
don't know. But is this one of the things you use to get military style in line? I'm not quite sure what's on this slide here, but maybe you could talk about just using data.
Right. And I wouldn't call this big data, right? This is data in the organization. We don't have a BI tool. I hate to say it, we acquired good data recently. So we did form a BI team, but I have yet to see the results of that. It just formed a couple of weeks ago, and we brought in a consultant to help us do a lot of this analysis. But in the meantime, just like Randy, I think we have to deal with the data that we've got available to us. And one of the things that most organizations, I feel like, wrestle with is how do you design territories? And a lot of data can be used to do that. For example, is that interesting to this team? I mean, how you? Okay, so I got one nodding head. I'll go through it.
All of you will have to suffer because one nodded.
Exactly. Yes.
That'll teach you.
Sorry. Yes, just shake your heads like that next time.
I mean, rip through this whole list. I want to hear this whole list, so don't
Okay.
just stay on that.
Yep.
Like, I want to hear, like, what are you using with data in these things? Even if you're just doing like a quick, couple sentences on each. How are you using quotas? How are you using territory? How are you using lead
Sure.
qualification?
Sure. Well, one of the biggest things, so I've always been kind of a data geek. I was a finance major. I love spreadsheets. When pivot tables came out, I thought they were just magical, amazing tools. And so I'll sometimes get a little carried away in spreadsheets and have to pull myself out. But one of the things that I always wrestled with as a sales leader is it the chicken or the egg? Is it the sales rep or the territory? And you always do that, right? As a sales manager, it racks your brain. You're not sure who to put on plan. Did you assign a bigger number than that territory could support, or was it the rep? Did they just not know how to communicate the value of the product? So one of the things that I did early on was construct a methodology of designing territories in large, mass-marketed B2B enterprise software companies, or that are appropriate to be used in those scenarios. And we would take a look at the bookings for a particular state, for example. We'd almost always do by state, and then you would gun down to phone area code. But the bookings you've done there, the revenue you've done there, the renewals that are available, the public trainees, for example, at Puppet Labs, we do a lot of public training, so whoever signs up for public training is obviously very interested in the product, because that's 3 days hands-on, lab-driven course. And then you want to kind of normalize the data with InfoWorld subscription data. You can get that still. I believe there are still actually some physical magazines that go and actually get delivered. Or you dig up the old data. Anyways, so you use all this combined with organic sales-ready lead data. So these are leads not generated as part of a marketing campaign that was outbound or driven through a trade show or something like that. These are leads that actually people typed in the words Puppet Labs or configuration management automation software and clicked on that link and came to Puppet Labs and filled out a form. So that shows innate interest from that particular geo region that you can really attribute to having a lot of interest. And then you weight all those accordingly and score those, and you create different territories. So if you've got 10 reps, you've got 1,000 points in your T-score, you of course want to design territories so that you have about 100-point score per territory. And that way when you assign quotas, when you assign territories, when you go to measure the rep performance, you've got a reasonably good shot at knowing whether or not it's the rep or the territory. Now, inevitably, and going back to the quota and the second bullet here, inevitably you can't design territories that are exactly the same. I hate to say it, I don't know if anybody's from Detroit, but a sales-ready lead from Detroit is not as good as a sales-ready lead from San Jose or Manhattan, right? That's just the way it works in the software business. And so you inevitably wind up designing territories geographically that just don't match. But then you can use that data, that T-score data, to assign quotas. So not only do you have equitable territories, but you've got reasonably equitable territories, reasonably equitable quotas. Let's see, lead qualification, as I talked about before, we do a lot of behavioral and demographic scoring, and that's what winds up getting leads to the appropriate people. Lead assignment, so we hook in data.com combined with Marketo, and the lead scoring, the geographic lookup of those leads gets the leads assigned to the right people.
Is that when you pay for a pro account on data.com?
Yeah.
I always wondered what that was.
Yeah, we just started that process, and
So
we're
you-
realizing it's magical.
So data.com is, it's Salesforce owns it now? And so then it's you have this record in Salesforce, and I only have 3 pieces of information on them. You push a button and things populate? Is that how it happens?
Exactly, yeah, you can sync the data.
How much
Depending
is
on what-
data.com to hook up to your Salesforce?
I don't know what the cost is, actually. It was very reasonable.
Huh,
Yep.
for what you're getting.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Wow, if anyone has Salesforce, hook up data.com. You'll
Yes.
do much better, get that information pulled in of who you're picking up the phone and calling.
Yep. Jigsaw is it used to be called Jigsaw.
Yes.
Now, one of the things that we're starting to use data to measure, and this is where I want to get the BI team to help me out and automate this process, because doing it by hand is labor intensive, as you might imagine. But we're starting to measure the lead funnel on not only an aggregate basis for the entire team. In other words, we measure raw lead to sales-ready lead conversion rates. So what percentage of your raw leads convert to sales-ready leads? What percentage of those SRLs turn into opportunities? What percentage frequency you're closing those deals, at what average order size, at what average order length, length of the sales cycle. That's your funnel, right? Well, we do that now for each individual rep, and that is incredibly valuable. That is something that it's a little big brotherish, but you can see, for example, what reps are good at closing. So once they actually get an opportunity, their close rate is much higher than their compatriot that may be better at converting raw leads into sales-ready leads and converting those into opportunities.
I knew you're a military manager using data. Look at that. The
Use
truth's
it-
coming
use it
out.
as stick.
Publishing stats, you just make sure everyone sees everything.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important. If you manage the team with data, you have to publish that data. Everybody, it should be egalitarian, if you will. I mean, you want to make sure that everybody knows where they stand in those rankings. But you also want to be very explicit that just because you're a great outbound dialer or prospector, that does not make you a great sales rep. The ultimate measure, of course, is performance to quota, right? I know, for example, of not dozens, but certainly several sales reps in my past. They are always number 1 or 2 in terms of number of activities, number of calls, number of emails that they prospected out into their territory with. And you would inevitably wind up last in terms of performance to quota. So make sure you don't measure to one piece of data.
And you always know who those guys are because they always have the newest iPhone or the newest iPad that they wanted that promotion, but
Exactly.
they, but always driving around in an old car, right?
Lots of great conversations about the tech.
Okay. Randy, what's going on with this slide? You sent it to me, and it's about using big data and small data. And I see a revenue factory. Tell me you got a revenue factory cooking.
So I told you it wouldn't take long. You talk to me about sales, and you're going to get the factory analogy. But
Sure.
I think this was in response to the question, how would I suggest that companies use data? I think the very first step is make sure that you instrument your business. Make sure that you, at least, and I'm talking very, very early on, try and figure out what you think the important things might be. Certainly sales stages, stages of the marketing funnel, instrument those. Scott was talking about conversion rates from raw lead to sales ready lead to opportunity to win. I even go, and then into the sales process, stages of the sales process, conversion rates at each stage, how long does it take, and then by rep, who's converting at which rates, who's weak here, who's strong there, and then when you look at their pipelines, you can compare that against what their pipeline must look like if they're going to make their quota. Right?
So having that check-in moment with your reps, whether it's 1 rep or 100 reps, having the halfway through the month, you should be at this point.
Yeah, and I think it becomes more important as you get larger, and I think we're just now getting to that point, but if you have 100 reps, and you manage a rep's pipeline review based on averages across the entire team, that's not as meaningful to them versus if you can show them, okay, you convert 25% of your opportunities to close, or you convert at this rate through all the stages of the sales process, this is what your funnel should look like, and this is what it does look like, right? And you have issues, gaps that we need to close. So that's That's one for sure. What else did I say?
What-
Oh, yeah, okay.
Go ahead, and then I have a question for you.
Well, I think the other thing, and I mean, we've talked a lot about the sales and marketing funnel. I think one of the things we've done a pretty good job at Zapproved is aligning the entire organization. So everybody knows what the revenue goal is, right? Everybody's marching to that same goal. Everybody knows what their contribution to that is. Our vice president of marketing, in a way, he has a quota, and it's pipeline dollars, right? So I know what my revenue number is. I know how much pipeline I need to get that revenue number. I strike a bargain with him that you take 50% and I'll take 50% of that pipeline, and then he's got a monthly pipeline number, right? And so that's the KPI that he's reporting to the executive staff. It's the KPI that he reports to the board. But we can only do that because we have the insight that comes from having instrumented that process.
Are you using Salesforce.com?
Yes.
Scott using Salesforce? Birst using Salesforce? So what is the tool people can use to track a pipeline of sales reps when they only have a handful of sales staff and they don't want to? I mean, I know Salesforce is so cheap when you get in, but it's so expensive. It has like this horrible expensive jump when you get to like 20 people, and it's super painful to pay for that. But you're trapped in it then, right?
Well,
and then it's great again once you're huge. But it's that middle stretch. Like, what other tools can people use where they'd have a little bit more of a runway and do the pipeline tracking? Is it only Salesforce?
I have no idea.
Don't bother.
Who said what? Zoho. Does Zoho does pipeline tracking? They do. Okay.
My opinion is don't bother. There's no real alternative worth considering. And the reason I say that is because, when I arrived at Zapproved, the pipeline
Randy,
was in
have
a
you tried
spreadsheet.
Zoho?
No.
It actually
No, I
does.
haven't.
It actually does suck. But
No, but when I arrived, the pipeline was in a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Right. We adopted Salesforce. We got everything in there. That was kind of painful. And it was kind of painful when we had, I'm not kidding, a total of 20 opportunities and 3 total customers.
right.
I can't even imagine doing it, the switching process. That would be excruciatingly painful. So just know that you're going to need it someday. Plan
Yeah.
for success.
Right.
Get there now. And if you're in a SaaS company, you have to bite the bullet and get at least professional editions so that you have recurring revenue support.
Is
you can't do
Sugar,
the
is
basic.
Sugar.com still around?
They're still around.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'd say it's first, everyone should have a spreadsheet of their pipeline. Next step up is Zoho. Next step up is Sugar. Next step up is Salesforce. Is that fair?
I agree with Randy. If you're going to go
Don't
to
do it. Just
Sugar,
get
you might
it.
as well just go to Salesforce.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, forget Sugar. All right, we got 2 slides left, and then we're kind of running out of time, so I want to have you guys kind of hurry through and see if we can get a couple of questions for the audience. One, I want to have Scott just talk a little bit about using this data to manage, and I see you got some really good, nice acronyms in there, and then we are going to turn it over to best practices, ending with some BI, and then we'll open it up if anyone has any questions. Scott.
So using this data beyond sales, one of the things we're starting to do is really measure, and then one of the general business metrics that I did not list on here is churn. Churn's the killer, right? If you have churn above, say, 10, 15%, you're in trouble. If you have churn in the 30% range, you're turning over your entire customer base within about 2.5 years. It's that can be the ultimate killer. So one of the things where you're starting to use data from our support system, from Salesforce, from our public wiki where people can file tickets and all that kind of stuff, we're starting to try to figure out the customer buying patterns, and not only the buying patterns, I guess, but issues that they're experiencing when installing the product and what have you, and then reaching out to those clients more proactively to make sure they're using the product successfully. So that's one area that we are starting to leverage quite a bit of data in that process for. Campaign influence, of course, you're mostly marketers. You understand that you've got to try to read the tea leaves. One of the biggest challenges, and one of the things that I think if one of you could invent, I would pay a lot of money for. But when you're in a company, and I'm sure both of us wrestle with this, is most every tool like Salesforce, like Marketo, that's built out there is built for individuals. You are tracking John Smith. You're not tracking AT&T. who John Smith works for. And when you sell a tool like Puppet Enterprise, when you sell a BI tool, as Brian does, then you've got 20, 30 people perhaps involved in that sales cycle, and tracking all the activities for all those individuals is really what you want to do, not tracking the fact that John Smith from AT&T actually went to a trade show, and that's what developed the opportunity. So you attach the lead source of trade show to that opportunity, track it all the way through the pipeline. Bam, it looks like trade shows are the greatest way in the world to develop a lot of revenue, but you didn't track those other 20 people that are involved in the process. If one of you could invent a way in which to track B2B sales, where you're tracking companies, not individuals, like I say, I'll spend a lot of money on it. So that's a challenge. Let's see, identification, buying patterns, we kind of covered that. There really, besides churn, there are three main things that we measure at Puppet Labs to track the health of the business. Customer acquisition costs, we talked about that a little bit earlier. Lifetime value of the customer, of course, is critical to making sure that our CAC isn't too high and that we're actually realizing that value based on low churn. And then annual recurring revenue is one of the things. Early on in the cycle of a company, it's a dollar's a dollar. If you're able to stick some money in the bank, it's fantastic. It doesn't matter if it's a $100,000 deal for 5 years and the customer's never going to have to pay for another dime for the product for 5 years. You just focus on the fact you put $100,000 in the bank. That's great. We're getting to the point now at Puppet Labs where we're starting to analyze the annual recurring revenue and making sure that the deals that we do are positive for the business, and that's we've got to encourage the reps to focus on ARR and get actually paid more for deals that are recurring. And even if they do get the money up front, we want to make sure that those out years, 2, 3, 4 years, we're getting those renewals and that they're at a significant amount.
So, Randy, customer acquisition cost, that you must do a lot of Birst implementations to help people really figure out what that is. Because you're pulling from just not, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at Brian, but I said Randy, that was a trick. Just to see if you're awake. You both passed with that stare you had going on. But yeah, because then you can go all the way from like a spreadsheet tracking, this acquisition cost to Salesforce, but then if you want to pull it into your operations, your marketing, your sales, all those different areas, you're tracking it in Salesforce right now, but you think you're going to track it using good data.
Both, probably.
Both.
Yep.
And how often are you putting that, is that a big the thing you're doing with BI tools?
Certainly with SaaS companies. I mean, we've talked to any number of CFOs and controllers of SaaS companies who are going out to companies like Sequoia to raise money. And they're pretty embarrassed when the next level question is asked about things like cost to acquire a customer. What are you factoring into that? What levers influence that? All those kinds of things. What is your, ARR? What is your growth efficiency? The typical metrics that a CFO of any, probably any of the companies for whom y'all work are focused upon. So that constitutes for us a huge portion of our business.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good question. The question from the audience, how many customers does everybody have up on the panel here?
Approaching 150.
About 900.
So we have about 250 direct and about 10,000 through embedded channels. So we have a large portion of our business is embedding Birst and other applications.
Okay. What's a sales cycle like for each of the panelists?
About 5 months.
About the same, 4 to 6.
We're in a little bit better shape. So 91 days was our average sales cycle last quarter, and that's trending up. So
No way. Birst only takes 91 days?
yeah, I mean it's thankfully it's a hot space. People don't usually call us unless they have a problem they want to solve right now.
Right. That's interesting. Okay. Let's end on a slide here, and then if anyone has any other questions, we can answer that if we have a minute. If not, we're going to be having beers next door at On Deck, and Brian's going to be paying for all the beer.
Courtesy of Doug Leone, managing partner at Sequoia Capital.
There you go. So best practices. Leave us with some thoughts on BI best practices.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably what you're hearing a lot from the three of us is that the process of understanding your data is very iterative by nature. So don't plan to solve a single discrete problem. Solving that discrete problem oftentimes prompts another set of 6 or 10 or 12 questions you might want to ask about your data, and it continues to be iterative. So plan for a BI project not to be like installing an app, right? It's a very iterative process. The single system of record, companies have been promising this again for 40 years. Salesforce.com, while they promise to be that 360-degree view of the customer, is never that, because you're capturing data about that customer in, for example, your application platform, how they're interacting with your software. That in and of itself provides a wealth of information that Salesforce could never provide. So the real value is in bringing together those two pieces of data among other pieces of data to get a better picture of the health of that customer or that relationship. The data, this is pretty self-explanatory, right? Data isn't useful if the insights aren't intuitive. I'm a very visual person, as I suspect most of you are as well. I can look at an Excel spreadsheet and it'll take me about a half an hour to decipher it, but if I look at 2 KPIs on a waterfall chart or something like that, I get the sense of it pretty quickly, what the data's trying to tell me. And then the most important thing is, when you're embarking upon an analytics project, we have a tendency to try to, I hate the term, but boil the ocean, right? We want to solve every problem our company has with analytics, and so we create charter committees and steering committees and all that kind of stuff, and try to map every single available source of data in our business, and try to understand how that data can help us improve our business. When what you really ought to be starting with is, what can I get? What's that first high value visible win we can get out of our data, and then let's iterate off that, right?
Great. Any questions from the audience? Do you have a mic, Corey? Maybe throw that around. Is the light on the bottom? Just so that our hundreds of thousands of people on live stream get to hear your question, Victor.
Okay, thanks. So Scott,
Can you say your name and your company?
Oh, my name's Victor Alekin, ex-Mobile Media. So Scott, I wanted to ask, since you've been through so many different iterations in a growth cycle of a startup, at what point do you think you get meaningful statistical data to make decisions on? I mean, in terms of customer sizes, that would be the question. How many customers does it take to build meaningful statistical data? What have you found?
From the startup to growth stage.
It's a good question. I think it all depends on a variety of different factors. But I'll go back to or touch on what I mentioned earlier, which is it's always been remarkable to me how a small piece of data, a small set of data, can be indicative of a longer trend. Even with more data, you tend to just validate what you saw with the 5 pieces of data you had. If Puppet Labs, our original average order size was X, and our length of our sales cycle was Y, that probably was represented in the first 10 deals we did. Even when we didn't have the product we're selling now, it's the exact same kind of cycle. And I think what that comes down to is what type of product you have and what type of problem they're trying to solve, and how long does it take them to get their arms around that, right? Because we're selling complex products, right? It's not easy to implement any of our tools, and it takes a while for them to understand how to solve the problems they're trying to get through, and then how to apply your product to actually do that successfully. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, though.
Well, more specifically, like when you're looking at different, I guess, data for making decisions, whether it might be, I don't know, territory, or how you're doing your leads and how you're setting quote. I mean, all these different things. At what point, if you got one customer, obviously the data isn't going to be good to say, well, I got this customer for a trade show. I mean, I'm just using one example.
Right.
But I mean, at what point do you get enough customers that you can start to do predictive, saying that, this is how I want to create a sales lead item, because I found this to be a pattern and it has some statistical relevance because I've got now 200 customers that I didn't know that when I had 10.
Yeah, because there's like a point of just going for it, right? You're going to trade shows, you're calling people, you're emailing, you're doing webinars, you're doing these different things, and then you don't really know, and then after a while you start to actually get some customers.
Right, when you got, again, 10 customers versus 200, you're going to be able to pull out different kind of metrics, and that's why I was just kind of curious, at what point typically do those metrics start to mean something? Is it at 10, at 100, or is there bits and pieces all the way.
Yeah,
Like,
I
does
think
it
it really
not matter at
depends
10? Should you
yeah.
just be going for it and trying to sell, or should you be spending time analyzing data?
Yeah, and it's always the chicken or the egg. You know, when do you add that next sales rep? You know, do you do it before the revenue comes and in the anticipation, or do you do it after it comes, for example? I guess to answer my own question, you wait as long as possible to bring in additional resources, if that's the question you're trying to answer, in order to address need in the marketplace. In other words, you want it to be painful in the first couple of years, so that your reps are so busy and they've got such a big load to carry, they can't handle it all. And then you start dripping in additional resources. In terms of the quantity of data, number of customers, what have you, I think that's highly dependent on your particular business, the product you're trying to sell. I really can't answer that question with any degree of accuracy. I don't know, Brian, do you?
I mean, I think you're right. It's highly variable, and I think the biggest factor there is what's your addressable market, right? 10 customers may represent a wealth of data if your addressable market is only 50 customers. But if it's 5 million, then it's pretty paltry sample size, right? So it really depends highly upon what your addressable market is.
Great. You guys, we are going to wrap up the panel here. We want to make sure we don't go over. Puppet Labs has just been awesome at giving us space. We want to be respectful of that. Just a few announcements. First of all, thanks to our panelists who they take the evening out. These guys, they deal with me bugging them about getting PowerPoints. They think about it. They put the stuff down, and they come here with their thoughts, and really appreciate you guys taking the time to do this. So round of applause for the panelists. Special thanks to Paul Colette, who does the videoing and works everything. If anyone needs video work, Paul is definitely your man. Do not hire anybody else. Puppet Labs, thank you for the space again. Appreciate all the sponsors, CorSource, TAO, and Crowd Compass. And our next meeting is going to be on November 5th, and it's marketing automation. Are you working too hard? So anyone who wants to not work as hard, have the leads just rolling in, have automation doing all of it, and then the sales guys do all the work, make sure you come to the next Innovation in Motion panel. And on closing, if everyone could just sort of straighten up, pick up your stuff, sort things away, that would be great. And then right across the street, on deck bar, I'm going to be stopping over there. Anyone else like to come on over and have a beer? That'd be great. Brian just opened up a tab, I heard. All right, everyone, thanks so much. Have a great day.